We have cited the betting odds ever since we started this show back in January. So let's continue there. And I mean, this is surprising to me how it's switched like that. I'm not sure I believe it, but look, we cited these when Biden was up, when Biden was down, when Trump was up, when Harris was up and down. So here it is right now, up to the minute. Donald Trump with a 57.1% chance of winning. Kamala Harris, 42%. Let's just round up. Let's call it 57-43 because there's a 0.7% undecided there. I guess my question is, and I've said all along, I never thought Donald Trump didn't have a chance to win, but it's surprising to me when the odds have shifted. I understand there were positive vibes for Kamala out of the gate, right? You had the bounce there, you had the bump. Tim Walz, good early. JD Vance, bad early. That kind of flipped. But also, like, clearly Kamala Harris defeated Donald Trump in the debate. But kind of since Vance beat Walz, and I'm not saying that's the reason. I mean, that's an important data point. But ever since then, we've seen this shift. After the debate where Harris beat Trump, it was like 56-44, whatever. Let's say 55-45 Harris. And now it's flipped even more towards Trump. And I just think it's kind of odd because we haven't really had that many big events. So I guess are people just saying, I've seen enough of Harris. She's starting to do interviews. I'm not liking what she's saying. I don't know. It's just kind of odd to me that it's shifted like this now. And if Donald Trump ends up winning, okay, but I feel like those odds weren't accurate back then though, because I don't know. I don't see so many people shifting over the last 3 weeks. I don't feel like there's been any seismic events that would cause that. What do you think?
Well, I agree. I think we're talking about two different things. The vibes have shifted and the underlying fundamentals have both shifted toward Trump, but the shifts haven't been equal. What I mean by that is the vibes have shifted way more than the underlying fundamentals. And that's the difference I think you see between the betting markets, which are, depending on which one you look at, you did the aggregate there 55-45. Some have it close to 60-40. They've shifted a lot or a decent amount. But the polling averages have changed in Trump's favor in the last week, but not that much, a point or so nationally and in some of the battlegrounds. And in fact, if you look at the election prediction models, which I'm a big Nate Silver fan, he has it 50-50. Now, that's an improvement for Trump because a week or so ago or 2 weeks ago, Harris was at 57-58%. But that's not a dramatic shift. That's still basically a coin flip where we've been. I think what you're seeing is the race is where it was always going to be. And what I mean by that is I just think barring some event that is just so at this point I don't even know what it could be. Like some event that would be so cataclysmic to our politics in a good way or bad way that would just shake everybody to their core. I think this was always probably where we were going to be. Like, if you look at history, I mean, look, what do they say? Like, the best predictor of, future is past performance. Donald Trump has run as a candidate twice. We have hard data on this, right? And in both elections, he got between 46 and 47% of the popular vote. And in both elections, the Electoral College was decided by less than 100,000 votes in a few states. Why would we think this would be any different? Like, if anything, we've gotten more and more partisan. People are more and more locked into their team and tribe. And so I know a lot of events have happened, like Joe Biden dropping out, the assassination attempt. These are wild events, historically speaking. But I don't know that they change the fundamentals of who the electorate is and how the country is divided. And so if you have two straight elections where a guy is running and it's decided by less than 100,000 votes in a few states, why would you assume that then the third election with the same guy in a row would be much different? So in some ways, I think we're reverting to the mean. But we have to be clear, there is a shift toward Trump. And look,
Yes.
Fox News, again, we talk about Fox. Fox has I know their reputation as a conservative outlet, but their polling reputation is very good. They use a Republican and a Democratic pollster. They have a very high rating, among the highest rated pollsters. They came out yesterday, Trump 50, Harris 48 nationally. That's the first poll other than Rasmussen that has had Trump ahead in weeks. I mean, so it's a little bit of an outlier, but I think it shows you that the momentum is with Trump slightly, not enough to fundamentally alter, I think, the conception of this race being very close, but it is slightly with him. And again, I think there is this lingering, looking at the past, there is this lingering thought that Trump will outperform his October polls like he did
Mhm.
in 2016 and 2020. And Real Clear Politics today, their average on October 2016, Clinton +7, she won by 2. So Trump did 5 points better than the polling in October of 2016. Biden was up 9 in their average on October 17th of 2020. Trump did 4.5 points better. If he does anything close to that this year, he will win. I mean, if he does 2 or 3 points better than his polling right now, he'll win all the swing states probably. So I think people again look at that past and they say, hey, it's happened twice where he's overperformed his October polling. Now, you could argue polling is better now. The pollsters have
It
learned their
should be.
lessons. You could argue there aren't as many shy Trump. They should be better, right? And they might be. They adjust. They try to get it even better than they have before. And also maybe the shy Trump voter, the person who didn't really want to tell a pollster he was going to vote for Trump or she was going to vote for Trump or wouldn't answer the phone. Maybe now they're enthusiastic to tell everybody, yeah, I'm voting for Trump. I think there's some evidence to that Trump has become kind of more acceptable in a lot of circles, support for Trump than it used to be. So that might be true as well. So I'm not saying it's a shoe in that he will overperform his polling. He might not. The polling error may actually be in Harris's favor this year. You don't know. It was in 2022. It was a Democratic lean in a polling error. So that could happen again. But I'm saying these are the things I think people in the betting markets are thinking, the kind of vibes that people are feeling is Harris just didn't ever get that strong, sustained lead. The momentum was there for her after big events, and then it kind of petered out.
Yeah, I try to go I know we joke about vibes. I try to go more on what's really happening in my life than on social media. And that's where I just feel like this push towards Trump in the last 2, 3 weeks, and I'm not saying Trump's not gonna win, but it feels much bigger than it actually is because I'm feeling it on social media. I'm feeling it
Yes.
specifically on Twitter/X. When I go about my real life, grocery store, go to the bank, what are interest rates doing? Again, the world's not perfect, but I don't feel a vibe shift in my actual life. And so that's where I just wonder about this. I also think, look, this sets the stage. We both agree on this, and I don't know how you disagree at this point. There ain't no way if Donald Trump loses that he's not gonna claim that this is all rigged and all that, especially now because the vibes on social media and YouTube and all the podcasters, because the vibes are now so much towards Trump. If Harris is able to win this, it gives even more credence to the fact that this thing is rigged because all the polls and all the
Yes.
betting odds have shifted towards Trump in the last 2, 3 weeks or so. And then one more thing. I was listening to this interview. Is it Major Garrett? Is Major Garrett the guy, the
Yes.
reporter for is it CBS?
I believe. Yeah, he used to be with Fox. I believe he is with CBS
Okay.
now. Yeah.
So he did an interview with a local radio station in St. Louis I just happened to listen to, and it was like a really good interview. It wasn't biased. It was very data driven. It
Yeah.
was about early voting and how you can't make too many conclusions you can draw from
No.
that and all that. But he said something very interesting because they were talking about, the shy Trump voter. Are the people who didn't wanna answer a poll and said that they would vote for Trump in 2016, are they gonna answer the poll now? Sure, I think there's less shame, and I'm saying air quotes "shame" for people if they felt any shame. I'm not saying they should have, but there's less of that probably in 2024 than 2016. But he brought up something very interesting. And he said one of the reasons there wasn't a red wave in 2022 based on the vibes is that there is no way to pull new registered voters, right? And this is what I'm saying is that data point no one knows about them. So that's what I always wondered because clearly when Roe v. Wade was overturned, you heard about all of these new people registering to vote, right? Well, they're not going to be
Yeah.
reflected in the polls. And clearly, a lot of those people registered specifically because Roe v. Wade was overturned. And then you saw there was no red wave, and they've basically flipped those abortion issues in every single state. So I just wonder if there's a bunch of new registered voters, and by the way, maybe they'll go towards Trump. I have no clue. But if all these people registered to vote because they liked Kamala or don't like Trump, or they're still pissed about Roe v. Wade, whatever it is, I do think you have a huge sect of voters that nobody really knows how they're going to cast their ballot.
Oh, absolutely. And that is why there's so much anyone who says this election is a shoo-in for one candidate or the other. I mean, yeah, maybe you'll be right if you say that. I just don't see any way you can back that up in the data. This is why I said kind of what you were talking about. The vibes have gotten so far ahead of the data. Yes, there has been a shift toward Trump in the last week, but it's very minor. And I just saw this today. So President Adam Carlson, who I like to follow on X, he gives a lot of good information. He tweeted this chart out the other day. The presidential polling averages for 538, the New York Times, Silver Bulletin, Nate Silver, and Split Ticket. They all do polling averages. They're all very similar. They use slightly different methods, but the results are pretty much the same. All of them have Harris still ahead in their polling averages in Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. Now, it is a 1.2 or less in all of those,
Mhm.
but they all have her ahead. And again, that's all she needs. If she wins those 3 states, she will be the president. And so why would it shock you if she wins those 3 states when she is leading in the polling average right now, albeit by a very slim margin in all of these major indexes? And that's why I said the vibes have gotten ahead of the data. Like, this election is a toss up. It's where it has been pretty much from the start with Biden versus Trump before the debate. It looked like it was going to be a toss up. And then when Harris got in, it looked like it was going to be a toss up. And guess what? It still looks like it's going to be a toss up. Reading the tea leaves to the point you made, I know people try to do this because we have so much early voting now, and they're trying to compare it to 2020 and what percentage, because you don't know how people voted, obviously, but you know the registration of the people that voted. So people try
Sure.
to read that, oh, the Republicans are voting in higher numbers in Georgia or Pennsylvania. Look, first of all, 2020 was so dramatically different. So many people were scared they might die. And so they mailed in their vote. Now they may show up and vote. So Democrats, I think, are more likely to show up on election day. And by the way, Republicans have smartly embraced mail-in voting now.
Yes.
Trump has gone from saying it's a total fraud to actually telling people to vote by mail. So compare the people who do that, I just think there's very little credence in that. But I think what the underlying facts of in a lot of these states, voter registration in the last couple years has favored Republicans, meaning Republicans have made a net gain in voter registration in many states versus 2020. And also, if you look at, I think it was Pew, it might have been Gallup, they do a huge survey of people every couple years, and they ask you, do you consider yourself a Democrat or Republican? One of the questions they ask. When that is done, it's done every election year in like August or September. It has in the past correlated very well with the national popular vote. So, for instance, if in 2012, roughly Obama's margin was roughly the same as the margin in this poll of people who said they were Democrat versus Republican. That poll this year, for the first time in a while, has more people saying they're Republican than Democrat. Not
Mm.
by much, but by a few points. If that holds true to what we've seen in the past, then obviously Trump would win, because we know Trump is going to win the election if he wins the popular vote. It'll probably be a blowout. So I think that's important to remember. And then the final thing I'll say about this is the point you made about the trying to overturn the election. Look, Trump was going to do that anyway. I mean, unless Kamala Harris won like Florida and Texas, Trump was going to do that no matter what. We know that. The question is, would he have any kind of shred of legitimacy? Or the answer to that is no, because there is no legitimacy, most likely, unless there is real fraud that can be proven. But would he have people willing to stake their reputation to back him, right? And I think the answer to that is yes. It is close enough, and he's doing well enough, and the vibes for him are good enough, and the betting markets for him are good enough that you know what's going to happen if Harris wins. They will claim victory probably right away on election night, even though we know that if it's a close election, it's going to take days to determine some of these states. Hopefully not as long as 2020, but it's going to take a while. And in that vacuum, he will step in and they will try to say the election was stolen. We know this. Is there? I seriously want to know: is there any Trump voter out there who thinks if he loses, he will not try everything he can to overturn the result? I mean, honestly, I don't know how you possibly could think that. I and like going. That's the reason why 2020 matters. Like Republicans get so mad. Why are you talking about 2020? The reason is because the same dude who tried to overturn the last election is 2 weeks away from maybe trying to overturn this one. That's why it matters. And I don't know if you saw this the other day. J.D. Vance at a rally. This was a rally. This wasn't even when he was being pressed by a reporter. He said this, quote, on the election of 2020, I've answered this question directly a million times. No, meaning no, Trump didn't lose. I think there are serious problems in 2020. So did Donald Trump lose the election? Not by the words that I would use, okay? I really couldn't care less if you would agree or disagree with me on this issue. Here's the thing that I focus on, because what the media will do, they'll focus on the court cases or they'll focus on some crazy conspiracy theory. What I know, what verifiably I know happened is that in 2020, large technology companies censored Americans from talking about things like the Hunter Biden laptop story. He said think the vice presidential candidate of the United States said for the Republican Party said he doesn't think his running mate lost the election in 2020, even though we know that he lost. It's been everybody who's looked at this, every court that it's been in front of, Trump judges, and here we are years later. Like you'd think maybe, okay, maybe they couldn't find the fraud right away, right? Maybe the fraud was so good that it took them a while. Well, it's been 4 years and they still have produced nothing. And yet and JD Vance is not stupid, right? Like he's not. I mean, you could argue that Donald Trump maybe actually believes it, that he didn't lose. I don't know if he does or not, but I think you can make the argument he does believe it. I don't think you can make that argument, Vance. Vance is just an opportunist. And so many of these Republicans are. And it's just stunning to me. Like, this would be disqualifying throughout most of American history that somebody would say this, that Trump would continue. Like, if you would have told me after January 6th that Trump's going to make a political comeback and maybe win, I would have said no way, first of all. But then
Me too.
if you would have further said not only is he going to have a chance to win and be the nominee, he's going to double down on January 6th and the election being a peaceful transfer of power, which is what he said the other day. It was a peaceful transfer of power, and that the election being stolen. Not only is he going to be the nominee and have a chance to win, but he's not going to walk away from this. He's going to embrace it, and he's going to say, I was right again, and talk about it all the time and not back down and equivocate. I would have said, that's crazy. Like, the American people will never accept that. But here we are.
Well, he also has an entire media arm that
Yes.
forgot about that. And then we know, I won't get into it, I mean, there was a very large settlement paid out about some of those issues, which we all know about, but that wasn't discussed necessarily on that network or to those folks. And whoever it is, whether it's Tucker Carlson or people on YouTube, they have sanitized January 6th, right? It's the same people that now think that all the protesters were let in the front door, right? They were let in. They were tourists.
Right.
They've changed the narrative. And there's a lot of people on their side, media wise, that have pushed that also. And I also think just some people think Democrats are so bad, Kamala's so bad, Biden's so bad. I remember I told you this the day after that debate, Eric, and I've stayed this way the whole time. I just said, to me, it's disqualifying what Donald Trump did trying to overturn the election. I actually think Republicans probably deserve to win this election. I just don't think Donald Trump deserves to win this election. That's why I said way back, I wish it was DeSantis or Nikki Haley or whatever it is. But even I, saying all those things and still believing them, after I watched Joe Biden implode at that debate, even I said, man, I think I still might want Donald Trump over Joe Biden. That
Oh
was
my
how.
God.
Seriously. No, but like, if you're really thinking about the health and future of our country at that exact moment, I don't feel the same way. I think Kamala, she's of the right age. She's a normal politician. I'm not saying she's special, but I've
She's
said
good
this.
enough.
She's good enough. And again, I think the Republicans are on the right side of many of these issues. That's why if it was Nikki Haley or Ron DeSantis, I truly really wouldn't care. I can admit I think the Republicans are on the right side of a lot of these issues in 2024, but I will never not think that Donald Trump disqualified himself for what he did after the election up until January 6th. You will never change my mind on that. No one will.
No. Well, and look, and here's the thing, it's hard. I don't know if I agree with you, even though I do maybe favor some Republican stances on some things, but I just think the Republican Party has been so tainted by Donald Trump that for me it's impossible to separate them right now.
Yeah.
Like because any Republican has to say certain things like climate change isn't real or downplay it or the 2020 election wasn't really stolen or we should deport every illegal immigrant here. Like there are things that I don't even know if they believe a lot of these things. I think some don't, but they feel like they have to say them now because that is what is acceptable in the Republican Party if you want a future. But I mean, just circling back to Vance for a minute, let's just take his argument at face value. So what he is saying is that you are right to not certify an election, which he says he would not have done if he was in Mike
Mhm.
Pence's position, which would have, let's be clear what that would have done. That would have thrown our country into constitutional chaos 2 weeks before an election. We would have people in the streets, not just in DC, but in every city. We would have, that's banana republic shit. Like that's what would have been the net result of not certifying the election is a complete crisis of our constitutional democracy. That's what would have happened. And Vance is saying, and his justification is because of the Hunter Biden laptop story, which again, we've talked about this before. I wish that X would not have minimized that for what was it, a few days or a week. It wasn't even the whole time. It was for a few days or a week. You couldn't share it, and it was a, what do they call it? Dialed down, basically. So it wasn't getting the kind of exposure it was. I disagree with that. In hindsight, it was clearly the wrong move. But to say that because you disagree with a private company, remember, these are private companies. And you can't even say it was the government pressuring them because the government was led by Donald Trump at that time. So these private companies made decisions you disagree with. Therefore, we need to try to overthrow an election. I mean, that is crazy. I know it's been normalized now, but could you imagine if Kamala Harris loses and she's like, I don't like the way X and Elon Musk have, when he took over, and the way that it's turned into a right-wing conspiracy theory, which, let's be honest, it to some extent has. And look what they've done with the leaked, Iran hacked. We know this now, the Trump campaign, right? And what happened now? They shot that stuff around. You know what the supposedly liberal mainstream media did? They didn't print it. They didn't print it. Remember what happened, by the way, in 2016 with Hillary Clinton's emails? They did print them.
And D
Those were
Podesta?
out in the domain. Yes, and Podesta. So
Podesta, I'm
just,
sorry.
but there was one person, or at least one, that did take that hacked Trump stuff and post it on Substack, I think. And you know what X did? They took it away. They
Yeah.
didn't allow people to go to it, right? So what if Kamala Harris says, you know what? X took away those Iranian hacked Trump campaign documents. That wasn't fair. So I'm going to try to overthrow the election now and make myself the president. Like she's the vice president. Maybe she tries to do what Trump wanted Mike Pence to do in January 2021 and say, nah, I'm not going to do it. We're not certifying this election. Of course she would, we know she would never do that because she actually, is a decent person who cares about democracy. But this is what Vance is arguing. I know, again, I know the issues are important. I know some people think that Republicans are better on the issues or Trump is better on the issues than Harris, but I can't get over that. I just
I can't either.
cannot get over it. I'm sorry. I will never get over people saying that whatever issue I care about or whatever personality I care about is more important than the country, is more important than the democracy and the election. And the fact that Vance, who again is a very smart guy and knows better, would say this kind of just absolute bullshit right before the election is just crazy to me. It is absolutely insane. And we just kind of gloss over it now, like, oh, well, that's just Trump being Trump or Vance being Vance. It's not okay. It's not sane. It's just like that's what matters. This other
Right.
stuff is important, but that at the end of the day is what matters.
Well, that's why I've always thought, honestly, and I could be wrong. Look, Trump may just win and I'm wrong, and I'll admit it. But that's why I've always thought Harris was going to win slightly, is because of those actual moderate, reasonable people who thought that trying to overturn the election in January 6th was a red line. And I think there's a large percentage of those people. Now maybe I'm wrong and immigration is so bad. And here's something we haven't brought up enough on this particular show, although we have a lot on our show. The cost of just life these days, right? The cost of just living is really tough for people. And there are probably some people that are like, you know what? I don't love Trump. I don't like what he did for the election, trying to overturn it January 6th. But gosh dang, I can barely survive
Yep.
paycheck to paycheck, week in, week out. That's another obviously huge part of it.